a role, a role to play for me. I think that something that you can relate to, something that gives you something you want to be, something that a character goes through, that there's an arc to the character, so that you go with him, you like him or you don't like him, but you find some redeeming value. He goes through some sort of process that brings you closer to he's become a better person, or he's made an impact upon the world or some other people. He's changed, and I think those things make a script rewarding. Well, I've had both, where there's been none, not even a direction written about, a description or anything like that. And then I've had one where Jerry Hellman was directing a film, and he produced Midnight Cowboy and, Coming Home, great movies. And he was directing for the first time, and he handed me two scripts. One was the final shooting script of the movie we were going to do, Promises in the Dark, Marsha Mason. It was a good cast. And I said, "What's this?" He said, "That's your character description." I mean, it was as thick as the script. And I read through it, and it was phenomenal. He actually had worked out my entire life. And marriages, children, divorce, everything, And I said, "Well, this is fascinating. I've never, ever seen anybody do so much work, and I'm grateful for that. However, if you create the life for me, what do I play? What's my job?" And we worked together on that. And then he started to go to acting classes with me, and found it quite useful. The thing is, what you got to do is you got to find your background. Now, what I did my research at Cedars. I was playing a radiologist. So I went to Cedars and I met Peter Julian, who was the head of radiology, who loved, to this day, says he plays me in the movie. But what I did was explore radiology and the makeup of radiologists. And basically, in my office, we then had, in the set, flowers x-rayed with lights behind them, so I had my own radiology art. And the thing about a radiologist, the way I was playing, was a guy who is removed from the patient. He talks to the doctor about what he sees. He never has to get in there and get too close. And so when he falls in love with the doctor, you see, it's also a guy who has to then deal with his feelings. And gives you levels. And you peel the onion, so to speak, to find the character and make it more interesting. So research is necessary. You want to know in a scene where you just came from, because you bring that life with you into the next scene. And if you don't know where you came from, then that's why you see a lot of movies. Somebody comes in the door, you don't know they've just been supposedly tearing down the street. They're desperate to get here, but if they walk in and that they don't bring that life with them, then something is happening in the writing. You got to talk the talk, and you got to make it real. I had, for example, when I first came over to London to do the series Dempsey and Makepeace, I had changed the character before my arrival in my meetings with the producers and director, and said it would be more interesting for me if this character were a New York homicide detective up from the gutter, so that when he comes over and he's partnered up with this lady, Harriet, so on and so forth, then you have a culture clash, which gives you more to play. And he'll try and tell her what Shakespeare was truly trying to say from the gutter point of view. They liked my approach to it, instead of the James Dempsey III originally written. But when I arrived, all the scripts had been previously written. There was no writing department. There was a room with the scripts piled up in a chair, and that's the writing department. So I had nobody to discuss, to work it out with, and so I had to do the rewrites, basically, because he wasn't going to pay the writers any more money to do it. One day on set, a writer shows up who wrote that particular episode, and he says, "You've missed a really great tool that I gave you." And I said, "What was it?" I said, I can't believe I missed it. He said, no, this is the key. This is something that becomes your catchphrase. This is, the whole thing, the jelly bean. I said, "What was it?" And he said, "I reckon." I said, "I'm sorry." He said, I reckon. I reckon. He said, yes, I put it in there several times, and I thought, that would be Dempsey's phrase. And I said, but Dempsey's a New York detective. He said, yeah. I said, people in New York don't say I reckon. He said, oh yeah, they do. I was in New York. I said, standing next to tourists from Texas. I said, people in New York figure. They figure. They don't reckon. I figure this, I figure that, but I don't reckon. I said, I noticed a lot of people in England do say I reckon. They use it as a catchphrase, but it's not real. And so, in that case, having the writer on board wasn't great. Other times, it's invaluable. It can be such a great tool if you got somebody to actually source and go to and say, what would happen if, or how does he, and you get it, and then you're flying. It's a wonderful thing to happen. It's a rare thing. Well, I think if they don't do research, you do read all different levels. Lately, I have 7 scripts on my sideboard right now, and I've had meetings on all these 7. Now we'll wait to see what comes of these things. One is one of those, they're making all these films in Romania now, the low-budget action films, and this one in particular was written by Steven Seagal. He doesn't even have his geography right. The countries aren't where he says they are, And it's like, you go, all right, well, this is going to be difficult. And, also, it's like, in those kind of films, it's like, there's always this character who says, find them now. And, before it's too late, and I take care of this, It's like, there's, I don't know how many I've read, they could have been switched around like that. So, they try to keep an original and make it real. I think it's basically, you want to say how it's said, and let the actor, let the characters speak. I think a lot of times in the writing, when I find it's working, and Larry Gelbart, who I admire as one of the best writers on the planet, said to me, listen to your characters. What does your character say? What is he saying in a story? Because usually they're right. So if you got a place where you're stuck, you're stopped, it's like that character's telling you something. And it's either got to be said or changed, and he's right. If the actor is coming from a place that is part of the overview for the best thing for the film, then you work for the intent of the scene, not coming from an egotistical place of like what I want to say, or I think my character would say this, or he should be the motivating thing in the scene, or no, it's about what fulfills the actor's intent. What is the scene about, and how do we get to that goal? And if it's better served by reversing a line or changing a line, then I think that's where you get together and you make the changes. I have worked on a movie, Richard Famous, George Cukor was directing his last picture. And Jackie Bissett said to me, do you mind if I reverse those 2 words? I said, I don't care, you can say anything you want, because anyway, it's fine with me. So she said, it just works better for me. I said, I'm okay with that. So we did the scene, worked fine. Cut! George came over and he said, the line is da 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 da. Don't improve the script. That's what it says. That's what you say. And when she stops talking, you talk. It doesn't say beat. It doesn't say pause. She stops, you talk. He stops, you talk. Let's go. And I went, wow. Is it always like that? She goes, always. So we do the scene. Cut, print. I said, hold it. And everybody freezes. Nobody moves. The camera load is like this. Did someone say something? I did. Yes, you did. What was it you said? You said, hold it. I said, that's what I said. And why did you say, hold it? Because that was bullshit. Did you say bullshit? I said, yes, that's what I said. That was bullshit. He said, yes, but it was good bullshit. And that was the style of the old director, because what he wanted, he said to me after the second line, I want you to cry. I said, cry? I'm asking her you want a glass of wine? I was sitting on a plane. He said, cry. If you're an actor worth your salt, you'll cry. Wow. So I tried, and I got there, and I said, you want a glass? Oh God! I was doing everything. I was working it, and we did the scene, and then it cut print, And the thing was, it wasn't about really crying. I was bullshitting her to screw her in the plane about. I made up a story about my wife being dead, and I'm a cad. And he said, that's what he wanted. You see, the lie. He didn't want the truth. He wanted the lie because that was the truth. And those kind of directors don't exist anymore. But that was, wonderful time. Yeah, I think if you've read the original material, then I did a film once called, well, the original title was Air, H-E-I-R, and it was a true story about the Annenberg heir to the fortune, the magazine Fortune, and the true story was he had his girlfriend, he overdosed her by accident, and they found him in the early morning hours sitting in his car, and the body had decomposed in his trunk. He was just at a loss. This story, Air, bought by, I think it was United Artists, to be directed by Noel Black, who had won an Academy Award for a short called Skater Dater and then Pretty Poison. And they hired Eric Siegel to write the screenplay. Now, Roger Simon, who wrote the book, perfectly willing and able to do this, but they hired Eric Siegel because, I guess it was Paramount, because he had just done Love Story. And he made it into a comedy. And what can I say? We didn't hear much about that movie, but that was an adaptation that didn't work because he didn't stay true to the material. And I think that there are adaptations which are actually better than, really well done. And it's an opportunity to really take something and make it fly. I think if you find something really good and then you adapt it, it could be a great thing. I think it all depends on how you approach the material, and if, what's his name, Jeffrey Kane just wrote the Constant Gardener. So you're taking a wonderful book, and that was a really good adaptation. I think if you don't try and take the limelight, if you've got something that's really workable, and just stay true to the story.
Now, you're a writer as well as an actor. How do you think your acting has informed your writing process? Have you noticed how that has affected it?
Well, there are good points and bad points. The thing is that when you get a scene and all of a sudden you can see what you really would like to say. And a lot of times, I guess I'm the kind of actor who will try to improve the script. If I can say it in less lines, or say it better, or say it in a few words, or really take the best of it and make it work. Or sometimes you want to develop and say like what's missing. You see what's missing in that scene, what the character wants to say, and that's where I think our actors and writers can work together. Because I once went to see Alvin Sargent, who's also a wonderful writer, and I was doing it. John Badham was directing this piece, and it's just, I said, it's missing that moment where he sees it all. I mean, he's told it by his father. He's shown it by his girlfriend, but he doesn't get it until he gets it himself. And then he goes, oh. And I said, and he said, well, like, what are you trying to say? I said, okay, every day he comes in and he opens the fish store and he closes the fish store at the sunset, Every day he does the same thing, and it's like those birds on the beach. Right, the ones that are right at the water, and they go like this, and they go back, and they just keep going like up and back like that, and he goes, yeah, so I said, well, it's just there's this moment when he gets it, and then he sees the change in his life, and he goes to tell her he loves her, and so on. Okay. The next day, what I said to him about the birds, he wrote, he put it in there. I said, oh, and it's listening. And then you hear what it's what the character wants to say, what the writer's doing, and the actor, and you work together, and it comes up nice. Well, there were lots. I think on one hand, I've got to play a few people who were alive, real people. In the James Dean story, I played Bill Bast, who was his roommate in college and was in love with him. And having Bill there as the writer to source was amazing. And I remember saying, well, now it was Jimmy Dean who turned you on to your own sexuality. He said, Michael, it's 1976. It's television. We can't. You know, and I said, but it's true, right? Yeah. So maybe in certain ways I could play that unspoken, right? And so we work that way as writer and actor, using more than the word. In a sense, like when we're sitting in the famous ice cream parlor, Jimmy Dean and Bill Bast, right? And, which is true, and they would, you know, we were there in the place, and they put down these 2 sundaes, and, you know, like that. I took one, and I put it underneath, and so I just took my spoon, and I ate out of Jimmy's. And the next day, the network executives were down and said, like, what's going on? What's happening? These 2 guys eating, you know, and Bill looks at me like, now you've done it. And I said, well, they're broke. You know, the college students, they don't, you know, couldn't afford to. They're broke. They're broke. And off they go, and, you know, but in little ways, we were making, you know, said what was true. And so, another time, well, Jerry Springer, the opera, I had Jerry, you know, to talk to and to get the truth. And Arno Penzias, who won the Nobel Prize for Hawking, you know, and he discovered the 3 degrees of, and I spoke to him on the phone. He gave me his glasses to wear that, you know. So those kind of things are wonderful to play because you have that source, the real source. When you don't have that, if you have the writer who created it, it's the next best thing. If you're given a good script, I think the more you have to find, to flush out, and to enjoy, and that becomes. And I think a writer's joy is when he sees what he's written come alive from the page. You know, when I did the last episode of Dempsey Makers, I directed, and I had to write it because all I had was a sketch of the script that didn't happen, so I had to do it in a hurry. And I was very fortunate because the actors who I called up without script came to work. And Don Henderson, who passed away, had his own series, played a character I wrote who did the paintings underneath the trestles, right? Like graffiti. But he read it like forecoming dooms, and he could interpret the messages of this graffiti and give me answers to finding the criminals that I needed to find. And it was magical because I wrote it and I said, I don't know, Don, see what you think of that, you know? And he said, in the jungle. And he started off with it, and it was, yes, this is, and you know, the joy of it all. It's a wonderful process. It's like, you're the creator giving life, and what could be better? So, you know, that's when the magic works, when you're lucky. Well, your skin's got to stay tough. Don't take it personally, and keep writing. I think that's what you got to do, is just keep writing, because it doesn't happen until you put the words down. I mean, you and I have sat in pitches where some of the worst things have been said. I mean, they haven't got a clue, you know, and you sit there and you think, oh God, you know, I can't do this. And then there's all of a sudden it's like, this is really good. And you know, when you get a little grace in your life. So you live for the grace, and you stay true to yourself, and you can't take it too personally. Can't hurt. I don't think it's what would it do for them? Maybe just seeing the process of how actors work might give them a better way of working with actors. It can't hurt to sit and to watch and absorb, and you know, for me, I've been on both sides, you know, so I think it's less is more. And sometimes you can just say in less times and in shorter words what you really have to say. You get to the crux of the matter, rather than go for the the beautiful line. You know.